back, FHN Northwest. We're here in the Bay Lab. Bay Lab brought to you by Sportco and Outdoor Emporium. Pretty much everything you see here can be purchased at those locations. So, hey, it's opening day of trout season coming up this Saturday, the 22nd. Utilizing bait for trout and getting, kids out fishing, even small kids, it's a great way to get a lot of catch in your return as far as, trout like bait. Yeah, casting spinners and stuff works. There's all kinds of techniques and methods we can deploy. But fishing floating bait off the bottom, like Pautzke's fire bait, suspended up off the bottom, it's almost a no-brainer, especially for our lakes that are freshly stocked with aggressive trout. So a couple points to think about in how you rig and how you present that bait so you get it up above the weed line and you're actually putting the bait where the fish are going to be, and you find some success. So the old standard one method, one way of rigging is pretty simple. Here at the table we got a 1/2 ounce egg sinker on my main line. It terminates here against a 5 or 4 millimeter bead, which is just simply there to protect the knot on my barrel swivel. I like to use a size 7 or 10 barrel swivel, something that's not too big, because you actually want the bait to float up, and if is able to do so, will actually continue to pull some line up through that sliding sinker, even elevating the swivel up off the ground, especially when a fish picks it up. This just goes to about a 4-foot leader on this particular rig, to a size 10 or 12 treble hook, okay? Now, treble hooks work great for a couple reasons. One, when I'm using something like fire bait, I can take a small amount out of here, okay? Just gonna work this into my hands, make it into a nice round ball, and then with this size 10 or 12 treble hook, this is really the key. We're gonna mold it right around the treble hook, and I like to make sure I kind of get those barbs exposed out, at least 1 or 2 of them, okay? It doesn't have to be a perfectly round ball, but I find that your hookups are a lot better when you got a little bit of that hook sticking out on the top side of there. And just takes 1, you can maybe get 2 of them, but now the key here is to have a large enough piece of bait melded around that hook that it's actually gonna float the hook up, okay? And if you're questioning whether or not you have enough bait on there for the first one, just simply toss it in the water when you get it on there and see if it's actually floating at the surface. Then you know about what size bait you need to put on there. Oftentimes we put on, quarter size or big balls of bait on there, and yeah, they float up really well, but they're almost too big for some of these planter fish to go ahead and grab. So it doesn't take much, dime size and a round ball on a treble hook in a slip sinker, 4-foot leader. The other thing you want to do if you're rigging multiple rods, put 1 leader at 4 feet, 1 at 5, 1 at 6. Let the length of the leader and the height off the bottom that the bait floats up to let you know or indicate to you where the fish are. If the 5-foot leader continues to get bit, swap all your leaders to 5 feet, and all the kids are catching fish. So pretty simple. The one thing about treble hooks is, on small baits like this, those trout can take them all the way in, and yeah, you're going to keep the fish, because in Washington State, when you catch trout in lakes on bait, you're required to keep those fish. Those treble hooks can be difficult to get out of the throat. Not so much about, ripping the fish apart or whatever to get it out, but more so you break your leaders, you cut your leaders, you leave the hook inside, and then you spend a lot of time retying. So another alternative, another method that I've gone to is, rigging a slip sinker. Here's another method of rigging a slip sinker. I have a barrel swivel on here. I have a Pro line lock, which is a slider also. I can use this mini line lock as a sliding device. I clip a small cannonball weight underneath that, 1/2 ounce, 3/8 ounce, whatever. And because this slides really well and free, it also is going to allow that line to pull through when the fish picks it up. So it's another way of rigging it. You can put the egg sinker on top of the swivel. You can put a line lock, slider line lock, and clip a small cannonball to it. On this one, however, I've actually put a single size 8 or 10 single hook. Now, the one thing we know about fire bait or dough baits in general, if you meld them or mold them into a round ball and put it on a single hook and cast it, it's not going to stay on the single hook very long at all. The water does begin to soften the bait, and eventually it'll float right off of the hook. Okay, the bait isn't designed to function very well on a single hook. That's why we use the treble hook. But again, treble hooks in the throats of fish means that you're constantly retying your hook. So when I use a single hook, I like to get some of the Mike's spawn netting and some of the Miracle thread, and I basically tie little bait spawn bags with the mesh. And so this is tied up with some of the spawn netting with the magic thread and a little bit of bait in there, and simply by putting that hook right through the mesh, it stays on there very well and for multiple casts. And because of the size of the bait, it definitely floats that single hook up. Plus I have a lot of hook exposed that typically will hook the fish more out towards the outer portion of the mouth versus deep in the throat. So they're easy to unhook and retain my hook, so I don't have to constantly retie. There's just a lot of good reasons, a lot of positives I see as to why I switched to fishing a single hook and taking the time to put the fire bait into the spawn netting. Now, how easy is this to do? Well, pretty simple. And you have multiple colors to choose from. You can mix and match. If I'm using the salmon garlic, I'm going to pull a little bit of this out of here, okay? And again, going to just put it into a round ball and drop it into the netting. Now I'm just going to pick up the corners, okay, and mold that around. Give this a couple spins to secure it at the top. Then I just take my magic thread. Now this is an elastic thread. There's no knot tying or anything. We're just going to basically multi-wrap this. You know, you end up doing it 8, 10, 12, upwards of 15 times. You just pull it nice and tight. Every wrap you put on there, you pull tight, break it off of there. Okay, then you're just going to cut that excess top of the netting off of there, and there you go. That is there's a bait right there. Now that bait is completely inside that mesh. I can stick that onto a single hook. It's going to float up. It's going to last. You can actually catch multiple fish on a single bait. Here's the other thing too. When we're teaching young kids, little kids, how to cast, they typically whip that rod pretty well. They cast pretty aggressively, which is fine. You know, put enough weight on there that they can comfortably cast it and they can, you know, get it out there a decent distance. The problem with floating baits or dough baits historically is once they get wet and you try to cast multiple times, especially when kids are casting pretty aggressively, the bait's going to fly off. So by putting it in the mesh on a single hook, they can cast and cast and cast, and that bait pretty much stays on there multiple times. They can cast it out, retrieve it. Sometimes with little kids, you got to let them continue to cast the rod multiple times because they get bored sitting and waiting for the fish to bite. So for me, there's a lot of positives in why I would take the time to put the dough bait or the fire bait into a spawn net. The other thing you can do, I can do this at home. I can put the gloves on. I can do an entire jar in pre-made, pre-tied little spawn bags. So when I'm out fishing with kids, especially if I got multiple kids, I'm trying to keep their lines in the water and keep the bait on so they're catching fish, I can simply open up the jar, take a single bait out at a time, hook it on there, and they're fishing. I don't have to worry about getting it all over the hands while I'm out fishing, rolling it. If it's raining and my hands are wet, it sometimes gets a little difficult to mold into a ball. So there's a lot of good reasons to take some time at home prior to opening day, get your jars all prepped up with your fire bait in a spawn bag, and it's going to fish way more durable. The kids are going to catch fish, and everybody's going to have a good time. So hopefully that helps you out for opening day, something to think about. Okay, don't go anywhere. Going to jump out for a quick break. We come back. We'll be back in studio to close out the show.